Aloha and welcome to Java. Thank you kindly for joining me. It's Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. First, a shout out to our friends in Texas. Hopefully, you're getting your power restored and you will be able to join us again. We miss you. So, we've got quite a bit to talk about today. Let's get started with the markets as normal. We've got the MMRI has pulled back in the risk area. So, markets went green. And right now we're still showing pre-markets in the green and the futures also in agreement. There was volatility towards the end of yesterday as we expected. So strongly in the green territory now, the level is at 62. More retail investors are coming in this past week than they have in months. So we've got basically a melt up going on. 10-year yield pulling back, it's very weak, and the relative strength of the dollar pulling back as well. We've got cryptocurrencies above the 62,000 level with this recent push. So I expect a pullback to that level to retest it. If it does, it means that the rally does have some legs to it, will very likely continue. If you bought into that, congratulations. Probably feeling pretty good about it right now, although I know it was difficult to do it at that time. So we've got US retail sales numbers coming out, and we're looking at bank earnings today. Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and Charles Schwab, among others. Pardon me, we'll go over that in a bit. So bank earnings, if there's weakness in them due to what's going on, could affect KRE, which is small banking sector, and the XLF, which is the financials. So indicator for the financials and loan conditions in general, we'll see how the banks are doing. What I expect is a divergence, and we've been speaking about this. We're going to see the mega banks doing much better, in particular JP Morgan, probably Morgan Stanley look to be pretty well as well. We've got Wells Fargo could take a bit of weakness. We'll talk about them in a moment, as well as Bank of America. We've been speaking about those for a while. They may be the sacrificials of the larger ones. In the meantime, smaller banks not keeping up, merging, claiming bankruptcy, shuttering, or getting bought by the larger ones. So calendar for today, retail sales, import prices, and then also home builder confidence that we're getting. Also some Fed speakers. Prior to market open tomorrow, we're getting construction housing data, but really in construction housing starts, new permits, more Fed speaking, and then we're getting more in industrial production and the Fed beige book. So we know a lot of those numbers are basically manipulated, but they're still going to be used as indicators for what the Fed is going to do. So today, after the close, these are the earnings we're looking at. More banks, smaller banks, as well as a couple of other companies. And then Wednesday, prior to opening, Ally is an online bank. We've got US Bank Corp, First Horizon. So some of these others, we'll see how they do. So with this, Morgan Stanley, Schwab profits, they're expecting them to follow bank stock upswing. We will see. We've got gold is in a run right now, been going kind of sideways, building momentum, and it's closer to a record, they're saying, as rate cuts look more likely for September. So if it looks like economy is going down, then the market will expect that they will cut, gold will go up. So what are we looking at with the banks? Rising deposit costs for Wells Fargo, dragging on its profits. That's headwinds for Wells Fargo. And then also Bank of America, as I was speaking about earlier, their profit falling on shrinking interest income. So what are these banks all looking at doing? We saw JP Morgan coming out charging you to have an account with them. We've got Wells Fargo and Bank of America already charging fees. So they're charging you to keep your money at these institutions where it's at higher risk, in my opinion. So just keep that in mind. We've been talking about getting your money out of the banks. There's several other areas to put it, namely precious metals, gold and silver, rather than keeping it in a place that's costing you money. So with this, the other side of this is mining company CEO talking about silver deficit growing, and institutions, if they move into it, could drive prices higher. So there's two sides to this. The first is if we go into this deflationary area, silver is also industrial. It could come down a bit, but it looks like, as far as on the charts, it looks a bit bullish and it could run. Um, Silver is more suppressed of an asset than gold is at the moment. So watch for silver. I'm still stacking. If it pulls back because of this, it would be another opportunity to buy, in my opinion. The price targets that they're looking at now are mid to high 30s for the end of the year. So we've got Japan likely spent $13.5 billion in yen intervention on Friday. Did watch more movement. They're being very quiet about it and choosing their times to move into the market to basically manipulate their currency. It is getting very difficult for them. Their inflation is going crazy as their currency is being slaughtered. So aside from this, we've got the SEC has given preliminary approval to at least 3 Ethereum ETF issuers. Now we had Bitcoin ETFs came out, was positive for Bitcoin. However, I think Ethereum's already priced in. Don't look for it to run up as much as Bitcoin, especially with what has just happened. However, it may become a sell the news event once they come out. So just issuing a little caution on Ethereum short term. We also had Tether. Now, Tether is supposed to be a stable coin tied in with the currency, but maybe it is more than we believe because they just minted another $1 billion of unbacked USDT on Tron. So basically, this quote unquote stable coin, they're just creating more of it. It's not going to have much value. It's going the same direction as the currency. So I don't recommend Tether USDT. Uh, just go into Bitcoin, especially if you don't know the space Bitcoin. Okay, with this, we've got oil falling on lingering demand concerns in China. So this is basically an indicator of falling demand. So falling demand in China is a predecessor to falling demand in the United States, keeping our eyes on this. I'm going to skip over here to Google. They've got a deal for hot market cyber firm Wiz. So Wiz, they are looking at purchasing, would bolster their cloud security. It is a cybersecurity company. However, this could also trip basically all of the concerns that they've got for antitrust. We've got in this space right now, unless they do, though, it's positive for Google. We've also got Amazon. They're coming out with the Prime Day sales. They're expecting a record $14 billion in sales. We'll see how that goes. That would be a decent indicator, not necessarily in the sales, but what is purchased. Is it essentials or is it discretionary items? I am expecting it to be more towards essentials that are on sale for people to save money on spending, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. So I've got a couple of things. What happens with this setup is for government intervention. And what happens with government intervention, they can't even run their own budget. How are they expected to run businesses when they go down? They generally don't do very well. So we've got the current administration calling for national rent control on corporate landlords. Now, there's two sides to this. First is, yes, rents have run rampant. However, there's other areas that could be stepped in without really controlling for the corporations of landlords, because their definition of corporate landlords can reach farther than what they say. They put a good face on it to make it look like they're trying to help the people. However, this always turns, it's basically just more control. You could just take out national rent control, take out rent, it's just national control. Why do I say this? Because they're basically obstructing so they could only do 5% rent increases. Now, what we did before basically is a maximum 10% rent increase and let the market dictate. Why do you do that? Because 5% is not beating true inflation. So what this is going to do is decentivize individual basically building or creating for rental spaces. And as they step out of this, it's going to basically mean that the government will have to control it completely, meaning provide housing. When they do that, it's more subsidized, basically, that they're looking at. So if they strangle this, like price controls, same thing with food. So expect more price controls setting up for them to introduce their solution. So while it looks good on the surface, beware of what's beneath it. With this, we've got another side of this. United Health expecting a larger hit to annual profit from hack costs. So they're setting up basically all of these hack cybersecurity will be more calls for security, and higher calls for security mean more constriction of freedoms, because in order to be safe, you cannot be allowed freedoms. So you've got to watch this also. So with this couple of final things, we've got stories coming out as Zelensky is saying Ukraine needs 25 Patriot air defense systems and more F-16s. Well, why wouldn't he call for these? More F-16s. He's getting so much basically donated to the country, and all of the money that's going in is going straight through corruption laundering. Very little of this is going to help where it's supposed to be. And I don't know that personally I agree with the reasons in the first place. At any rate, I've got one other thing, this story coming out, and I actually cannot mention this, but basically the presidential hopeful talking about supporting these rights. Second Amendment. So I knew this would not be long that it would be used against this to curtail yet another freedom, because if you don't realize it, right now you do have the freedom and the right to protect yourself and your family and your friends. And if this comes under fire, you will be required to depend upon this very same government to protect you for you. And they're typically never there when you need them, as we could just see with what just happened. So I think we should turn this on its ear and say that the government is not going to protect you, so we need more of this, because you need to be able to do it for yourself. That's my personal opinion. If you feel a different way, feel free to tell me in the comments. I've had a lot of unsubscriptions lately. I suspect it could be linked to this, but that is the way that it is. So with that, I wish you all a wonderful day, and I hope that you would prefer to stay free. So until I see you again, my friends, I wish you the best.